As I walked through the courtroom's back door, following my son on his crutches, the judge froze mid-sentence. His eyes widened as if he'd just seen a ghost. "Good heavens, is that you? What are you doing here?" A hush fell over the room as my daughter-in-law and her arrogant family exchanged looks of sheer panic. I placed my worn leather briefcase on the defense table with a solid thud. The sound echoed like a declaration of war. But before I continue, please make sure you're subscribed to the channel and drop a comment below. Where are you watching this video from? We love to know how far our stories are reaching. 3 months earlier, I never would have imagined setting foot in a courthouse again. My life had settled into a quiet routine, cooking for my son, Michael, and my granddaughter, Lily, tending to our small garden, and occasionally helping with the bookkeeping for some of the neighborhood shops. To everyone in the neighborhood, I was just Mrs. Eleanor Vance, the devoted mother who had single-handedly raised an exemplary son, a civil engineer who had managed to build his own house on the outskirts of the city after years of relentless work. Everything changed on a Thursday afternoon. The phone rang while I was preparing dinner. The foreman from the construction site where Michael worked was on the other end, his voice choked with emotion. "Mrs. Vance, Mrs. Vance, there's been an accident. Michael fell from the scaffolding. He's at the hospital. You need to come quickly." My world collapsed. I dropped everything and rushed to the hospital, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I arrived, I found Michael lying in a bed, conscious, but with a vacant look in his eyes. The doctor explained the situation with a chilling coldness. Michael would never walk normally again. His legs had sustained severe damage. In the best-case scenario, he would be able to move with crutches for the rest of his life. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, was by his side. At first, she seemed to be handling the situation well. She hugged Michael, stroked his hair, and promised that everything would be okay. But as the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I watched her behavior gradually change. Her hospital visits became shorter and more spaced out. The phone calls dwindled. When Michael finally returned home, she wasn't there to welcome him. I arrived with him in the taxi. I had to support him by myself into the room I had improvised on the ground floor, all to spare him the humiliation of not being able to climb the stairs to the bedroom in the very house he had built with so much pride. "Mom, where's Jessica?" was his first question upon entering the house. "She called saying she had to sort some things out, but she'll be here soon," I lied, because I didn't have the courage to tell him she hadn't answered my calls for 2 days. Jessica appeared late that night. She came in quietly, but I was awake on the sofa next to Michael's bed. When she saw me, her gaze was one of pure irritation. "I thought you would have gone home by now," she said coldly. "This is my home now, too. Michael needs constant care," I replied calmly, though my blood was boiling inside. The days that followed were torture. Jessica made no effort to hide her contempt for Michael's new condition. She went out frequently. She would return late, smelling of expensive perfume that I knew my son hadn't bought Lily, my 7-year-old granddaughter, noticed the tension, and increasingly sought refuge in me. As if sensing her small world was falling apart one afternoon. While Michael was sleeping, I overheard Jessica talking on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice was low, but I could hear her perfectly. "Yes, I've already spoken to the lawyer. The divorce won't be a problem. He's practically an invalid now. Yes, the house is the most important thing we'll get. At least half, maybe more. No, the mother-in-law doesn't know anything." My heart froze. The house that Michael had built brick by brick, saving every penny of his salary for years, was at risk. The place where I promised him we would never be evicted, where he finally felt the security we never had during his childhood, when we lived from one rented apartment to another after his father abandoned us. I contained my rage and decided to observe more. In the following days, I noticed Jessica taking photos of furniture and documents, making notes about everything in the house as if preparing an inventory. She spoke frequently to someone on the phone, always going out to the patio so we wouldn't hear her. Then, one Sunday morning, she dropped the bomb during breakfast. "Michael, we need to talk," she said, placing a folder on the table. "This isn't working anymore. I want a divorce." Michael dropped the cup he was holding, his eyes, already sad for months, filled with a desperation that broke my soul. "Jessica, why? I know I'm different, but I'm still the same man. I can still be a good husband, a good father." His voice cracked. "It's not that," she cut in coldly. "I haven't felt the same for a long time. The accident just sped up the inevitable." Then, looking directly at me with a cynical smile, she added, "And of course, according to my lawyer, the house will have to be sold. It's an asset acquired during the marriage. I'm entitled to half." Michael's face turned even paler. The house was everything to him, his greatest pride, the concrete proof that he had fulfilled the promise he made to me when he was just a teenager. "One day, Mom, we'll have a house that no one can take from us." That night, after Lily had fallen asleep, I found Michael crying silently on the balcony, clutching his crutches as if they were the only thing keeping him upright. "Mom," he whispered, "what am I gonna do? This house is all I have to leave for Lily." I sat beside him and held his hand. For a moment, I went back in time and saw my 10-year-old boy crying after his father left us. The same helpless expression, the same tremble in his lips. "Michael, this house was bought before your marriage," I said firmly. "I have the documents to prove it. Jessica has no right to it." He looked at me, surprised. "Are you sure, Mom?" "Absolutely. And what's more," I hesitated, but I knew it was time to reveal something I had kept hidden from him for decades. "I know how to fight for this in court." The next morning, Jessica showed up with a man in an expensive suit and a leather briefcase. She introduced him as Mr. Davies. Her lawyer, they sat in the living room with the arrogance of those who believe they have already won. The lawyer spread papers on the table and began to explain how the divorce process would work, how the house would be appraised and sold, and how Lily would be placed under Jessica's primary custody, considering the father's current condition. Michael sank deeper into the armchair, his hands trembling on his crutches. Before I could say anything, Lily entered the room. She had heard everything from behind the door. "I don't want to go with Mommy. I want to stay with Daddy and Grandma," she cried, running into Michael's arms. Jessica's face contorted with rage. "Lily, don't be ridiculous. Your father can't take care of you anymore. Look at him. He can barely take care of himself." Those words were like a stab to Michael's heart. His eyes filled with tears, and he hugged Lily as if it were the last time. It was in that moment that something inside me awakened, something I had buried for over 30 years. I stood up, walked to my room, and returned with an old wooden box. Inside it was a golden brooch in the shape of scales, still shiny despite the years. "Mr. Davies?" I said with a calmness that surprised even myself. "I believe you are making a grave mistake. This house was acquired by my son before the marriage. I have all the documents to prove it." The lawyer smiled condescendingly. "Ma'am, with all due respect, current jurisprudence considers assets acquired even shortly before marriage as part of the common patrimony, especially if they were used as the family residence." "That's not true," I countered firmly. "Article MIM 659 of the Civil Code is very clear on this matter." His smile faltered. "You understand law?" I placed the brooch on the table. The symbol of the Bar Association gleamed under the morning light. More than you can imagine. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. Mr. Davies picked up the brooch, examined it for a few seconds, and then looked at me with a different expression. There was no longer disdain, but caution. "Is this yours?" he asked. "It was mine for 20 years before I retired." Jessica laughed nervously. "What is this? Some kind of bluff? You're just a housewife who bakes cakes to sell on the weekend." Michael stared at me with wide eyes, as if he were seeing a stranger. "Mom, what is she talking about?" I took the brooch back and put it in my pocket. "Before you were born, Michael, I was a lawyer. one of the best in the city, specializing in family law. They called me the Eagle of Justice because I never lost a case. Silence filled the room. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in Jessica's eyes. "This is ridiculous," she tried to dismiss, but her voice failed her. "If you were really a lawyer, why would you give it all up to be a simple housewife?" "Because I chose my son," I answered simply. "When you were born and your father left us, I decided that my career was no longer more important than raising you properly. I took a leave of absence from the bar and dedicated myself to you full time." Michael was stunned. "Why did you never tell me?" "There was never a need," I replied with a sad smile. "I wanted you to see me only as your mother, not as the lawyer I once was." I turned to Mr. Davies, who was now nervously flipping through his documents. "Now, counselor, I think we need to review all these papers, and I suggest we start with the house documents, which I have safely stored and which unequivocally prove it was acquired by Michael 2 years before the marriage. The weeks that followed were intense. Jessica, seeing her initial plan crumble, changed her strategy. Now she was fighting for exclusive custody of Lily, alleging that Michael, in his condition, could not adequately care for his daughter. To our surprise, she obtained a questionable medical report stating that Michael suffered from severe depression that compromised his parental capacity. The doctor who signed the document was a cousin of Jessica's new boyfriend, as we later discovered. Meanwhile, I worked tirelessly to prepare our defense. I dusted off my old law books. I updated myself on new laws and jurisprudence. I spent sleepless nights reviewing every detail of the case. The feeling of being immersed in the legal world again was strangely comforting, like meeting an old friend. Michael watched me with growing admiration. At night, as we reviewed documents, he would often stop and just look at me with a smile on his lips. "What is it?" I asked on one of those nights. "I'm trying to imagine you in court, facing judges and lawyers," he replied. "You must have been incredible." I smiled, feeling a pang of nostalgia. It was an important part of my life, but nothing compared to raising you. "Why did you never go back? After I grew up, you could have resumed your career." I sighed, looking at the pile of documents before us. Some doors, when they close, are very hard to reopen. I didn't tell him the whole truth. I didn't mention the last case I defended, the scandal involving a corrupt judge, the threats I received, or the decision to disappear from public life to protect my son. Some wounds are too deep to be exposed, even after so many years. Each day, the hearing drew closer. Jessica intensified her campaign against Michael. She started taking Lily away on weekends, returning with the child loaded with expensive gifts, and filling her head with promises of a luxurious life if she stayed with her mother. "Did you know that if you come live with me, you'll have your own room with a TV?" I heard Jessica tell Lily one afternoon when she brought the girl back, "And we can get a puppy, the one you always wanted." Lily, at 7, was confused by the whole situation. One night, I found her crying in her room. I sat beside her on the bed. "What's wrong, my love?" I asked, drying her tears. "Grandma, Mommy said Daddy can't take care of me anymore because his legs are sick. Is that true?" My heart ached. "Of course not, sweetheart. Your father loves you more than anything in the world. His legs are hurt, but his heart and his brain are perfectly healthy, and it's with them that he takes care of you, you understand?" Lily nodded, but still seemed worried. "But Mommy said that if I tell the judge I want to stay with Daddy, we'll all be poor and lose the house." That was like a punch to the gut. Jessica was manipulating her own daughter, preparing her to lie in court. I hugged Lily tightly, fighting the rage growing inside me. "Lily, listen carefully. You only have to tell the truth, always the truth. And the truth is what's in your heart. Nobody is going to take this house from us, I promise you." On the eve of the hearing, I received an unexpected call. It was Margaret, an old secretary from the office where I used to work. Somehow, She had found out that I would be back in a courthouse after so many years. "Eleanor, you're not going to believe who the judge in your case is," she said, her voice full of excitement. "Arthur Wallace." The name landed like a bomb. Arthur had been my colleague at university, then a young lawyer I frequently faced in difficult cases. Our rivalry was legendary in the legal circles of the city, and now he would be the judge deciding the fate of my son and granddaughter. "Does he still remember me?" I asked, surprised. Margaret laughed on the other end of the line. "Eleanor, nobody forgets the Eagle of Justice, especially not someone who lost to you as many times as Arthur did." That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood on the balcony, watching the stars and thinking about how fate takes curious turns. 30 years ago, I faced Arthur in crowded courtrooms, fighting for wealthy and powerful clients. Now, I would face a courtroom again, but fighting for the most precious thing I had, my family. The next morning, I helped Michael get dressed in his best suit. Despite the circumstances, he looked elegant, his beard well-trimmed, his hair combed. Lily was beautiful in her blue dress, her hair tied with matching ribbons. "I'm nervous, Mom," Michael confessed as he adjusted his crutches. "Me too," I admitted, "but we'll be fine. Trust me." We arrived at the courthouse an hour before the scheduled time. As we slowly climbed the stairs, hampered by Michael's crutches, I saw Jessica arriving in a luxurious car that was certainly not hers. Beside her was a tall, elegant man we had never seen before. She smiled when she saw us, a cold, calculating smile. "Look at them," I heard her say to the man, loud enough for us to hear. "Pathetic." Michael looked down, hurt. I squeezed his arm in support and kept walking, head held high, guiding my son and granddaughter into the courthouse, where our battle would be fought. When we entered the courtroom, a few people were already waiting. Jessica and her lawyer were there, as was the elegant man I now knew to be Vincent, her new boyfriend. We sat on the opposite side, me between Michael and Lily, holding both of their hands. And then, at 10 o'clock sharp, the side door opened and the judge entered. Arthur Wallace was older, with gray hair at his temples and some wrinkles marking his face, but he still had the same haughty bearing, I remembered. He sat, adjusted his glasses, and began to leaf through the case documents. When he looked up to examine the parties present, his gaze passed over Jessica, her lawyer, and finally settled on us. That's when he saw me. His eyes widened. He dropped the pen he was holding. For a moment, I thought he was going to have a heart attack. "My God," he muttered, so low I barely heard it. "Is that you, Eleanor? What are you doing here?" Silence fell over the room. All eyes turned to me, including Michael's, who seemed as surprised as the others by the judge's reaction. I stood up calmly, straightened my blazer, and replied in a firm voice I hadn't used in decades. "I'm here to defend my son, Your Honor." The entire courtroom seemed to have frozen. Judge Arthur Wallace was staring at me as if he were seeing a ghost. For a moment, all the years that had passed since I left the law disappeared, and we were once again the young lawyers crossing swords in epic legal battles. "I request a 10-minute recess," Arthur announced, banging the gavel before anyone could protest. He stood up quickly and exited through a side door, still visibly shaken. A murmur immediately filled the room. I saw Jessica leaning towards Mr. Davies, whispering frantically. The lawyer looked worried, urgently consulting his tablet. Michael turned to me. "Mom, what just happened? You know the judge?" "We were colleagues a long time ago," I replied, trying to sound calm, though my heart was racing. "We competed a lot in court." "And apparently you impressed him," Michael commented, a small smile forming on his lips for the first time in days. Lily tugged on my sleeve. "Grandma, why was the judge so surprised to see you?" I bent down to her level. "Because, sweetheart, sometimes people are surprised when they see someone from the past." Before Lily could ask more questions, the side door opened again and Arthur returned. His face was more composed, but his eyes still revealed astonishment when they landed on me. He sat down, cleared his throat, and resumed the hearing. Continuing, divorce and custody proceedings between Jessica Almeida and Michael Vance, he announced, his voice now firm. I see the respondent is being represented by... He hesitated for a moment. Eleanor Vance. Mr. Davies stood up immediately. Your Honor, we need to question the legal representation in this case. Mrs. Eleanor Vance has not held an active registration with the Bar Association for decades. She cannot act as counsel. Arthur looked at me, waiting for my response. I stood up calmly. Your Honor, I am here as a defense assistant to my son, not as retained counsel. The Code of Civil Procedure allows relatives to accompany and assist in cases like this. Arthur nodded. The request is granted. Mrs. Vance may remain by her son's side to assist him. Mr. Davies looked frustrated, but sat back down. Jessica shot me a look of pure hatred. The hearing proceeded with Jessica's lawyer presenting his arguments. According to him, Michael was incapacitated not only physically, but emotionally to care for Lily. He presented the questionable medical report and testimonies from witnesses who claimed to have seen Michael in a state of deep depression, neglecting his own health and well-being. Furthermore, Mr. Davies continued, the house, although acquired before the marriage, was substantially modified and appreciated in value during the union. With joint investments from the couple, therefore, it constitutes a common asset to be shared. While he spoke, I took meticulous notes. Every half-truth, every distortion, every manipulation of the facts was recorded to be debunked later. Michael watched it all in silence, his face a mask of contained pain. When it was our turn, I stood up with an energy I hadn't felt in years. Your Honor, I began, the case before you is not just a common divorce, but a calculated attempt to destroy the dignity of a good and honest man whose only fault was suffering a workplace accident. I saw Arthur raise his eyebrows slightly. He always appreciated when I got straight to the point. First, regarding the house, I continued, handing a folder with documents to the bailiff. These are the purchase records, dated 2 years before the marriage. Additionally, here are all the financing payment receipts, made exclusively with Michael Vance's salary. The judge examined the documents attentively as I continued. As for the allegation of joint investments, there is not a single receipt showing that Mrs. Almeida contributed financially to improvements or modifications to the property. On the contrary, we have here, I handed over another folder, all the receipts for materials and labor, again paid exclusively by Michael Vance. Mr. Davies interrupted. Your Honor, the wife's domestic work must also be considered as a contribution. I fully agree, I replied, before the judge could speak. Domestic work should be valued. However, we have testimonies from 2 housekeepers who worked at the couple's residence during the entire period of the marriage, paid entirely by Mr. Michael Vance. Mrs. Almeida's domestic contribution was, at best, limited. I saw Jessica clench her fists in anger, her face red. Regarding custody, I proceeded, the medical report presented by the opposing party was issued by a professional who has a first-degree kinship with Mrs. Almeida's current partner. I request that it be disregarded due to a flagrant conflict of interest and that a new evaluation be ordered by an independent judicial expert. Arthur nodded, taking notes. He seemed impressed, and that gave me more confidence to continue. Furthermore, the defense would like to request a hearing with the minor, Lily Vance, who is present today, so she can express her opinion on whom she wishes to reside with, as provided by the child statute. Mr. Davies stood up again, agitated. Your Honor, the child is only 7 years old. She does not have the discernment to make such a decision and was certainly influenced by her grandmother. Arthur reflected for a moment. The request is granted. I will hear the minor in my chambers without the presence of the parents or lawyers. Jessica paled. She knew her plan to manipulate Lily into lying in court had fallen apart. With Arthur speaking directly to Lily, without her influence, the truth would come out. Arthur called Lily into his chambers. The girl looked at me, scared. "Go ahead, sweetheart," I whispered. "Remember what we talked about. Just tell the truth." Lily nodded solemnly and followed the judge out of the room. The 15 minutes that followed were the longest of my life. Michael squeezed my hand tightly, his face tense with worry. On the other side of the room, Jessica wouldn't stop whispering to her lawyer and shooting us furious glances. When the door finally opened and Lily returned with the judge, Arthur's expression was serious, but there was a glint in his eyes that I recognized well. It was the glint he always had when he was about to do justice. "After hearing the minor," he announced, "and carefully analyzing the evidence presented by both parties, I determined that provisional custody of Lily Vance remains with the father, Mr. Michael Vance, with supervised visits for the mother, Mrs. Jessica Almeida, until the conclusion of a complete psychological evaluation of the family." Jessica's face contorted with fury. "This is an absurdity," she shouted, standing up abruptly. "You are favoring them because you know this old woman." "Mrs. Almeida," Arthur banged the gavel forcefully, "another comment like that and you will be removed from the courtroom for contempt. And as for the house, I determine that it remains the exclusive property of Mr. Michael Vance, according to the documentation presented." Michael let out a sigh of relief, so deep it seemed to come from his soul. Lily ran to hug him, a huge smile illuminating her little face that had seemed so sad for weeks. As Arthur closed the session and scheduled the next hearing, I noticed Jessica and her lawyer were already preparing to leave, defeated. Before they passed through the door, however, Jessica turned and gave us one last look. "This isn't over," she said through gritted teeth. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." That threat hung in the air like a dark cloud. As I hugged Michael and Lily, I felt a shiver run down my spine. Jessica was right about one thing. This was far from over. When we left the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Somehow, the news that the legendary Eagle of Justice had returned had spread. Microphones were shoved in my direction. Flashes went off. I protected Michael and Lily as best I could, making my way through the crowd. "Mrs. Vance, is it true you've returned to law after 30 years? How does it feel to face Judge Wallace again? Why did you abandon your career at the height of your success?" I ignored all the questions, focused only on getting my family home safely. But as we finally reached the car, one last question hit me like an arrow. "Mrs. Vance, do you think the Marlowe case might finally be reopened after all these years?" I stopped suddenly. My blood ran cold. The Marlowe case. The case that forced me to abandon everything. The case that made me fear for my son's life. The case I thought was buried 3 decades ago. Somehow, the past I had tried so hard to leave behind had found me again. The mention of the Marlowe case haunted me for the rest of the day. As I prepared dinner for Michael and Lily, I tried to hide my unease, but my thoughts were 30 years in the past. Victor Marlowe had been one of the most powerful men in the city in the 90s. A businessman, owner of construction companies and development firms, and secretly, a money-laundering empire that stretched across the country. He seemed untouchable, protected by corrupt politicians and bought-off judges, until an ambitious young lawyer crossed his path, me. It was the biggest case of my career. I represented Marlowe's wife in their divorce, a scared woman who had finally found the courage to leave him after years of abuse. During the asset investigation, I discovered documents that incriminated Marlowe in a corruption network involving judges, prosecutors, and businessmen. I did what I thought was right. I attached everything to the case and reported it to the prosecutor's office. What followed was a nightmare. Marlowe used all his power to destroy me. He bribed the case judge, who dismissed all the evidence. I was accused of forging documents and defamation, and I nearly lost my license to practice. But the worst were the threats. Anonymous notes describing Michael's routine at school, then just 5 years old. Photographs of us taken without our knowledge. A clear message: back off or suffer the consequences. One night, when I came home, I found the door forced open and in Michael's room, a teddy bear with its head decapitated. That's when I decided that no case was worth my son's life. I withdrew from the case, took a leave of absence from the Bar Association, and we disappeared. We changed neighborhoods. I changed my last name back to my maiden name and became just Mrs. Eleanor, the devoted mother who baked cakes to supplement our income. Marlowe died 10 years ago, but his influence and his network of corruption certainly survived him. And now, for some reason, that ghost had resurfaced. "Mom, are you okay?" Michael's voice brought me back to the present. He was watching me from the kitchen doorway, leaning on his crutches. "Yes, son, just tired," I forced a smile. "You were amazing today, you know?" Michael came closer, his eyes shining with admiration. "When the judge saw you, it was like he was seeing a living legend." I smiled, this time genuinely. Arthur and I had many battles in the past. He was brilliant, but often on the wrong side of justice. And now he's a judge. Michael shook his head, incredulous. "The world takes many turns." "Yes, it does," I sighed, thinking about how those turns sometimes lead us back to places we'd rather avoid. After dinner, when Lily was already sleeping, I went to my room and opened the box where I kept the few mementos of my previous life. At the bottom, hidden under yellowed papers, was a USB drive I hadn't touched in decades, the only copy of the evidence against Marlowe and his network that I had kept, for security. I connected the drive to my old laptop and, to my surprise, the files were still there. Photos, documents, recordings, proof of a systemic corruption that never came to light. Names of judges, politicians, and businessmen, many still active, some in even more powerful positions today. My phone rang, making me jump. Unknown number. I answered hesitantly. Eleanor. The voice on the other end was deep, male, vaguely familiar. "Don't say my name. You're in danger." "Who is this?" I whispered, though I was almost certain. "An old friend, someone who was on your side in the Marlowe case." The voice hesitated. "We need to talk, but not on the phone. Tomorrow, noon at the Central Alameda, near the main statue." The call ended before I could respond. My heart was beating so hard it felt like it would burst out of my chest. Richard Nolan, the prosecutor who had supported me in the Marlowe case, before also being threatened and transferred to a small town in the country's interior, he had also abandoned the fight, like me. But why seek me out now? I spent the night awake, thinking. The next morning, when Michael woke up, I told him a lie, that I needed to go downtown to resolve matters related to the case. He offered to go with me, but I insisted he stay with Lily. "Is something wrong, Mom?" he asked, worried. "You've been strange since yesterday." "Nothing to worry about," I lied again, hating myself for it. "Just nervous about the progress of the case." I arrived at the Alameda Central 20 minutes early. The place was crowded, as always. I chose a bench with a good view of the main statue and waited, carefully watching everyone who passed. Promptly at noon, a man with gray hair and a simple suit sat next to me. It took me a few seconds to recognize Richard Nolan. He had aged a lot, his face marked by deep wrinkles, his shoulders slumped. "Eleanor," he murmured, not looking directly at me. "We don't have much time." "Why did you look for me, Richard? What's going on?" He sighed deeply. "I saw you on the news yesterday. The Eagle of Justice returns, they're saying, and I wasn't the only one who saw you." A shiver ran down my spine. "Who else?" "Vincent Thorne." The name fell like a bomb. Vincent had been Marlowe's right-hand man, his lawyer, the man who orchestrated the entire operation to destroy me 30 years ago. A cruel, calculating man who would stop at nothing to achieve his ends. Is he still active? I asked, my mouth dry. Richard nodded gravely. More than ever. After Marlowe died, he took control of everything. The corruption network, the illegal businesses, everything. And now he's practically untouchable. Something clicked in my mind. Tall, elegant, around 60? Richard looked at me, surprised. You saw him? Yesterday at the courthouse with my daughter-in-law. His face paled. My God, Eleanor, it's not a coincidence. He must be using your daughter-in-law to get to you. The pieces started to fit together: Jessica's sudden change, the divorce, the attempt to take Michael's house. It wasn't just greed or cruelty. It was a carefully orchestrated operation by Vincent Thorne. But why? Why now, after so many years? Richard, this doesn't make sense. Why would Vincent care what I do now? The Marlowe case is dead and buried for decades. Richard leaned closer. It's not. 2 months ago, the U.S. Department of Justice began an investigation into international money laundering. They're following the same trail you found 30 years ago, only now on a much larger scale. My heart leaped, and the evidence I had would be enough to bring down not only Vincent, but half the judiciary of the Capitol and several powerful politicians. Richard looked nervously around. Vincent must have found out you kept copies, and now that you've reappeared publicly, he wants to make sure you won't hand them over, I completed, feeling a knot in my stomach. Exactly. He's using your daughter-in-law to attack you, Eleanor. He probably found her by chance, but when he discovered who she was, he turned her into a weapon against you and your son. My voice broke. And now? Do you still have the evidence? I nodded slowly. Then you have 2 options, Richard said, his face a mask of seriousness. Hand everything over to the FBI, who are coordinating the investigation, or destroy everything and hope Vincent believes you're no longer a threat. And if I hand over the evidence, you and your family will need protection. Witnesses against people like Vincent have a poor track record of survival. We were silent for a few moments. The plaza continued at its normal pace around us. People in a hurry, street vendors, children running, a world oblivious to the drama unfolding on our small bench. I need to think, I said finally, and I need to protect Michael and Lily. Richard nodded, standing up. Use this phone to contact me, he said, discreetly sliding me a prepaid cell phone. It's secure, and Eleanor, be careful. Vincent is not the type of man to give up easily. I watched Richard walk away into the crowd, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. 30 years ago, I had chosen Michael's safety over justice. Now I was facing the same dilemma again, only this time the threat was already inside our home, in the form of Jessica and her new boyfriend. When I returned home, I found Michael on the balcony playing cards with Lily. When he saw me, his face lit up. How did it go downtown, Mom? He asked. Productive, I replied vaguely. Michael, we need to talk about Jessica. He sighed, the smile disappearing. Did you find out something new? Lily, sweetheart, I addressed my granddaughter. Can you go get that chocolate cake from the kitchen for us? The girl nodded cheerfully and ran inside. When she was far enough away, I sat next to Michael. Son, you saw Jessica's new boyfriend. Vincent? Michael frowned. Only from a distance. Why? Do you know what he does? Where she knows him from? Jessica said he's a businessman, owner of construction companies or something. She met him at a work party, I think. Michael looked at me, confused. Mom, what's going on? I hesitated. Telling Michael the whole truth would mean involving him in a danger he didn't ask for or deserve, but keeping him in the dark could be even more dangerous. Michael, do you remember I told you I gave up law to dedicate myself to you? He nodded. That wasn't the whole truth. I quit because we were being threatened because of a case I was investigating, a corruption case involving very powerful people. Michael's eyes widened. And what does that have to do with Jessica? The man she's with now, Vincent Thorne, was part of that corruption scheme, and I believe he's using Jessica to get to us, especially now that I've reappeared publicly. Michael paled. My God, do you think Jessica knows this? That she's consciously betraying us? I sighed. I don't know, son. She might be being manipulated or she might be an accomplice. Either way, we're in danger. At that moment, Lily returned with a plate of cake, an innocent smile on her face. Michael and I exchanged a worried look. Our small family, which had just won a battle in court, now faced a much greater threat. And I knew that this time I couldn't just run away and start over. This time, I would need to face the ghosts of my past once and for all. The day after my conversation with Richard dawned gray and rainy, as if the weather reflected the storm brewing in our lives. After a sleepless night, I made a decision. I wouldn't run anymore. It was time to face Vincent Thorne and end this threat once and for all. Michael! I called to my son as he had his coffee. I need you and Lily to spend a few days at Aunt Margaret's. Michael looked at me, perplexed. Why? What are you planning, Mom? It's just a precaution, I replied, trying to sound casual as I prepared the coffee. Things might get complicated in the next few days, and I'd rather you were away. Michael put his cup down forcefully. We're not children, Mom. I'm not going to run and leave you to face this alone. Michael, please. My voice failed. It's not for me. It's for Lily. She needs to be safe. He hesitated, looking at his daughter playing innocently in the living room. Finally, he nodded. Okay, I'll take Lily to Aunt Margaret's, but I'll be back immediately. No, don't argue, Mom. He interrupted me with a firmness in his voice that reminded me of his father in his rare moments of courage. You sacrificed everything for me. I'm not going to leave you alone now. I swallowed, feeling a mix of pride and fear. My son had grown up more than I realized. I reluctantly agreed. After Michael left with Lily, I went to my room and retrieved the USB drive. I connected it to the laptop and began to organize the evidence methodically. Like in the old days, I separated documents, photos, and recordings. Everything that could be useful for the FBI investigation. I made copies and stored them on different devices, including an anonymous email account I created, especially for that the prepaid phone Richard had given me rang. It was him. Eleanor. I got in touch with the FBI agent in charge of the investigation. He wants to meet you tonight. Where? At the Continental Hotel at 8 p.m., room 512. Go alone and don't tell anyone. I'll be there, I replied, feeling a mix of relief and apprehension. The afternoon passed slowly. Michael returned as promised, and we spent the next few hours reviewing the documents together. I told him everything about the Marlowe case, about the threats, about why I really gave up law. He listened in silence, his eyes widening occasionally with the revelations. Why didn't you tell me before? He asked when I finished. I wanted to protect you, I replied honestly. I wanted you to have a normal life, without fear. Michael shook his head, a sad smile on his lips. You gave up everything for me, your career, your identity, everything. And I would do it again, I replied, holding his hand. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Michael. At 7:30 p.m., I left to meet the FBI agent. Michael insisted on accompanying me to the hotel, despite the difficulty with his crutches. I left him in the lobby, promising to be back in an hour. I went up to the 5th floor, my heart pounding. The hallway was deserted and silent. I stopped in front of room 512 and knocked gently. No one answered. I knocked again, louder. Silence. A shiver ran down my spine. Something was wrong. I tried the doorknob, and to my surprise, the door wasn't locked. I opened it slowly, prepared to back away if necessary. The room was dark. I fumbled for the light switch and turned it on. What I saw made me freeze. Richard was lying on the floor, a pool of blood spreading beneath his body. I rushed to him, but a quick touch to his neck confirmed my fear. There was no pulse. Richard was dead. Before I could process the horror of the scene, I heard a noise behind me. I turned quickly. Vincent Thorne was standing in the bathroom doorway, a cold smile on his aged but still cruel face. Eleanor Vance, he said slowly, savoring my old name. Or should I say, Eagle of Justice. It's been a long time. I stood up slowly, keeping my eyes fixed on him. There was no sign of a weapon, but that didn't mean he wasn't armed. "Vincent," I replied, keeping my voice firm despite the fear. "Why am I not surprised? You're behind this." He laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Old habits die hard, as do old threats." His eyes narrowed. "You should have stayed forgotten, Eleanor." "And you should be in jail," I retorted, "along with all the judges and politicians you and Marlowe bought." Vincent took a few steps around the room, circling me like a predator. Victor was a visionary, you know. He built an empire. And when he died, he left it all to me. Everything. Except one problem. You and your damned evidence. "So that's it? After all these years, you're still afraid I'll expose your crimes?" "It's not fear, Eleanor. It's prudence. The Americans are investigating, snooping around. If they find you, if they find out what you know..." He left the sentence hanging. I can't allow that. I took a step towards the door, calculating my chances. "What do you want, Vincent?" I asked, buying time. "The evidence? I don't have it anymore. I destroyed everything years ago." His eyes gleamed dangerously. "We both know that's a lie, Eleanor. You were always too meticulous not to have insurance." He came closer. "Where is the evidence?" "Far from your reach," I replied. "And if anything happens to me, it will be automatically delivered to the authorities." It was a bluff, but it was my only chance. Vincent hesitated, weighing my words. "Always the same clever player," he muttered. "But you forget that now I have an advantage I didn't have before." "Which is?" "Your son and your granddaughter." His smile widened as he saw the panic on my face. "Oh, don't worry, they're fine. For now. But you're going to give me all the evidence, or the next person on the floor will be your precious Michael." My blood ran cold. "If you touch them..." "That depends entirely on you, Eleanor." He took a cell phone from his pocket. "One call. That's all I need to make." I was cornered. If I handed over the evidence, there was no guarantee Vincent would leave us alone. He would certainly kill me as he had killed Richard. But if I refused, Michael and possibly Lily would be in immediate danger. At that moment, I heard a noise in the hallway, footsteps. Voices. Vincent also heard it and turned quickly towards the door. It was the moment of distraction I needed. With a quick movement I didn't know I still possessed at 60, I lunged at him. I wasn't a strong woman, but adrenaline and desperation gave me enough strength to push him against the wall. His phone fell to the floor. I kicked it away and ran for the door. Vincent recovered quickly and came after me, grabbing my arm forcefully. "You're not going anywhere," he shouted, his face contorted with rage. We struggled briefly. I tried to break free while he tried to drag me back into the room. That's when I heard a familiar voice. "Let go of my mother." Michael was in the hallway, leaning on his crutches, his face pale but determined. Beside him, to my complete surprise, was Judge Arthur Wallace. Vincent froze, his eyes widening at the sight of Arthur. "Wallace," he whispered, "what the hell are you doing here?" Arthur advanced, his posture imposing despite his age. "Doing what I should have done 30 years ago, Thorne." My conscience finally spoke louder than my fear. For a moment, I didn't understand what was happening. Then reality hit me. Arthur had been one of the judges bought by Marlowe and Vincent. That's why he had dismissed my case against Marlowe all those years ago. I started, but couldn't finish the sentence. Arthur looked at me with shame in his eyes. "When I saw you in court yesterday, Eleanor, I knew it was my chance for redemption. Your son sought me out today, worried. He told me about your suspicious meeting. I came immediately." Vincent laughed bitterly. "So you're going to turn against me now, Arthur? After all these years of taking my money?" "Hypocrite." "It's too late for me," Arthur replied calmly, "but not to do the right thing." He took his cell phone from his pocket. "The police are on their way, Vincent. It's over." Vincent looked around like a cornered animal. Then, in a desperate move, he pushed me forcefully and ran towards the emergency stairs. Arthur tried to intercept him, but Vincent was faster and disappeared through the stairwell door. Michael came quickly, leaning on his crutches, and hugged me. "Mom, are you okay? I was worried when you were late. Judge Wallace showed up at the hotel asking for you and—" "I'm fine," I replied, still shaking. "But Richard—" I pointed to the room where my old friend's body lay. Arthur went there and came back with a grave face. "We need to call the police immediately, and you need to tell them everything, Eleanor. Everything." In the following minutes, the hotel filled with police. We were taken to the station, where I spent hours giving a statement, handing over the evidence I had kept for so long, and explaining every connection, every crime I had discovered 3 decades ago. The detective who listened to me seemed increasingly stunned by the revelations. "Mrs. Vance," he said finally, "this is much bigger than we imagined. I'm going to need to involve the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, and you and your family will need protection." I looked at Michael, who had stayed by my side throughout the entire statement, and felt a wave of love and gratitude for his support. Still injured, still facing his own challenges, he was there, strong as a rock. "What happens now?" I asked the detective. "Vincent Thorne is already on the wanted list. All city exits are being monitored. He won't get far." He paused. "As for your daughter-in-law, Jessica, we will need to question her to determine her level of involvement." Michael sighed heavily. "She probably didn't know anything, right, Mom? She was just a pawn in Vincent's game." I put my hand on his. "Probably. But that doesn't excuse what she did to you, son. When we were finally released, it was already dawn. Police escorted us home, where 2 officers would remain on guard until Vincent was captured." The house seemed strangely empty without Lily, but I was relieved she was safe with Margaret. Michael and I sat on the balcony, too exhausted to sleep, still processing everything that had happened. "I feel like I'm getting to know you all over again, Mom," Michael said softly. "This whole story, you facing powerful people, being threatened, giving up everything for me. It's surreal." I smiled tiredly. "I never regretted it, you know? Choosing you over my career, over justice. You were always my priority." He held my hand. "And now, when all this is over?" I looked at the sky where the first lights of morning were beginning to appear. I don't know. Maybe for the first time in 30 years, I can finally be who I really am. Eleanor Vance, the Eagle of Justice, and Eleanor Vance, your mother, both, without having to hide one of them. Michael smiled. "I like that idea. Lily will love to know her grandmother is some kind of retired superhero." I laughed, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The danger hadn't passed yet, but for the first time in decades, I felt true hope. Not just to survive, but to live fully, without fear, without secrets, and perhaps to finally bring justice. The days that followed were a whirlwind. The news of Judge Arthur Wallace's arrest, who turned himself in voluntarily to cooperate with the investigations, and the hunt for Vincent Thorne, dominated the headlines. My name, which had been forgotten for 3 decades, resurfaced with full force. Eagle of Justice returns and dismantles corruption scheme that survived for 30 years. Reporters surrounded our house day and night, kept at a distance by the police who provided our security. Michael, Lily, and I lived practically in isolation, going out only for statements or when absolutely necessary. On the 4th day after the events at the hotel, we received the news. Vincent Thorne had been captured trying to flee to Paraguay. The wave of relief I felt was indescribable. For the first time in days, I slept without nightmares. The next morning, I was called for a formal statement at the FBI field office. There, I found a team of local investigators and 2 FBI agents who had flown in specially after the evidence I provided reached Washington. "Mrs. Vance," said the lead agent, a middle-aged man with a serious demeanor. The evidence you kept is the missing link in our investigation. You have just helped us dismantle one of the largest money laundering networks in the Americas." 30 years later, I commented with a sad smile, "I suppose better late than never." The lead local detective, a woman with a firm gaze named Renata, added, "Based on your evidence and Judge Wallace's collaboration, we have already obtained arrest warrants for 3 magistrates, 2 prosecutors, and a senator. This is just the beginning." "And what about Jessica?" I asked, thinking of Michael and Lily. "My daughter-in-law," Detective Renata consulted some notes. "It has been proven that she had no knowledge of Vincent Thorne's criminal activities. He manipulated her, as he did so many others. However," she paused, looking directly at me, "the recordings you provided, where she instructs the minor to lie in court, constitute the crime of parental alienation. She will answer for it." I nodded with mixed feelings. I didn't wish Jessica ill despite everything. She had hurt Michael deeply and tried to take her home. But deep down, she was just another victim of Vincent, manipulated by promises of a luxurious life. When I returned home that afternoon, I found Michael and Lily on the balcony. My granddaughter ran to hug me as soon as she saw me. "Grandma, Daddy said you're a heroine, that you caught bad men." I laughed, hugging her tightly. "I'm not exactly a heroine, sweetheart. I just did what had to be done." Michael smiled, leaning on his crutches. "To us, you are. You always have been." That night, while Lily slept, Michael and I talked at length about the future. The investigations would continue for months, maybe years. Our lives would never be the same. "I'm thinking of going back to law," I confessed, almost ashamed to admit this desire at 60, reactivating my license. Michael nodded, unsurprised. "I knew you'd say that. I saw how your eyes shone in court, Mom. It was like you had rediscovered a lost part of yourself. It's crazy, isn't it? At my age, starting over." He held my hand. "It's never too late to be who you really are, Mom. You taught me that." 3 months later, I received news that would once again change the course of my life. The U.S. Attorney's Office, recognizing my crucial role in dismantling the corruption scheme, invited me to join a special task force as a consultant. It wasn't exactly returning to the courtroom, but it was a recognition of the eagle of justice I thought I had buried decades ago. I accepted immediately. My first day in the new role coincided with the final hearing of Michael and Jessica's divorce. Custody of Lily had been definitively granted to Michael, with supervised visitation rights for Jessica, after she completed community service for the attempted parental alienation. When I entered the courtroom that morning, I was no longer the desperate mother trying to protect her son. I was Eleanor Vance, the eagle of justice. With my head held high, not afraid to show who I really was, the case was quick. The new judge, a young, serious woman, confirmed the previous ruling. The house would remain entirely with Michael, and he would have custody of Lily Jessica. Sitting on the other side of the room seemed a shadow of the arrogant woman she had been months before. Our gazes met briefly, and I saw regret in her eyes. As we left the courthouse, a young woman approached me timidly. She looked to be in her early 20s, carrying a folder full of papers, and she looked at me with poorly concealed admiration. "Mrs. Vance, I'm sorry to bother you. My name is Julia. I'm a law student, and, well, your story deeply inspired me." She hesitated, nervous. "I'm writing my thesis on women who challenged corrupt systems in legal justice. Would you agree to an interview?" I looked at that young woman, seeing in her a reflection of what I had been decades ago, full of ideals, determined to make a difference. The Eleanor Vance who never really died, but just waited patiently for her moment to be reborn. "It would be an honor," I replied, smiling. A week later, I received another unexpected call. It was the Bar Association inviting me to give a lecture on legal ethics to new lawyers. As I hung up, I felt an emotion I hadn't experienced in a long time, a renewed sense of purpose. Michael noticed the change in me immediately. As we had dinner, he commented, "You look younger, Mom. Your eyes are different." How different? Alive. Bright. As if they've regained something they lost a long time ago. I smiled, knowing he was right. "You know, for 30 years, I lived only as your mother, and it was the best part of my life, don't get me wrong, but there was a part of me that was asleep, waiting." "The Eagle of Justice," he completed. "Yes, and now, for the first time, I feel I can be both your mother and the lawyer. I always was, deep in my heart. Without having to choose, without having to sacrifice one for the other." Michael nodded thoughtfully. "I think I understand. It's like how I feel about the accident." He looked at his legs, at the crutches leaning against the chair beside him. "At first I thought I had lost everything, my mobility, my independence, my marriage. But now I see I gained a lot too, a new perspective, a new strength. And Lily," I added, looking at my granddaughter playing in the living room, "you have her completely now." "Exactly. Sometimes we need to lose something to find something even more valuable." A month after the final hearing, I parked my car in front of a building I hadn't visited in 3 decades, the headquarters of the Bar Association I had come to officially reactivate my license to practice. The young assistant looked at me with curiosity when I mentioned my name. "Eleanor Vance? The Eagle of Justice?" I smiled, no longer ashamed to hear that nickname. "Yes, that's me. It's an honor to meet you, ma'am. My mother always talked about you. She's a lawyer, too." As I filled out the necessary forms, I reflected on how life comes full circle. 30 years ago, I left this place with a heavy heart, believing I would never return. Today, I was returning not as a defeated person, but as a survivor. On my way home, I stopped in front of the construction site where Michael had had his accident. The site now housed a nearly completed commercial building. I thought about how that tragedy had triggered a series of events that, although painful, ended up freeing us. Michael from the toxic marriage with Jessica, and me from the ghosts of the past. When I got home, Lily ran to meet me with a drawing in her hand. "Look what I made at school, Grandma." It was a childish drawing of a woman with a cape, flying like an eagle over a city. In colorful letters, she had written, "My grandma, the superhero." My eyes filled with tears. I hugged Lily tightly, feeling a deep gratitude for the path life had laid out for me, a path full of challenges and renunciations, but also of love, courage, and finally, redemption. That night, sitting on the balcony with Michael, watching the stars, I thought about all the events of the past few months, about how that moment in the courtroom when the judge recognized me with astonishment had been the turning point for a new phase of my life. "What are you thinking about, Mom?" Michael asked, noticing my silence. "About how curious fate is," I replied. When I first walked into that courtroom, I was terrified, but at the same time, there was a part of me that knew it was time to stop running, to face my past once and for all. And was it worth it? I looked at him, my son, my greatest pride, and beyond him, to the room where Lily slept peacefully. Our house, our safe home, remained intact. And inside me, the Eagle of Justice was flying again, free after decades of confinement. "Every second," I replied with conviction. "Every second, a year had passed since that first hearing that changed our lives forever. Summer arrived in full force, transforming our days into a succession of blue skies and starry nights. Our house, which we had almost lost, became a symbol of our resilience, of our ability to overcome the greatest adversities. Michael made significant progress in physical therapy. Although he still used a cane for longer distances, he managed to walk without support inside the house, to the delight of Lily, who celebrated every small advance as if it were a great victory. As for me, Eleanor Vance, the Eagle of Justice, I was reborn from the ashes like a phoenix. My collaboration with the prosecutor's task force led to the arrest of more than 20 people involved in the corruption scheme: judges, lawyers, businessmen. None escaped when the evidence I kept for 30 years came to light, supplemented by the statements of Arthur Wallace and others who decided to cooperate in exchange for reduced sentences. Vincent Thorne was sentenced to 30 years in prison for murder, active corruption, money laundering, and criminal conspiracy. His image in court, head bowed and defeated, contrasted with the arrogant man who had threatened me in the hotel that fateful night. On a particularly hot Saturday morning, I was preparing breakfast when the doorbell rang. Michael, who was reading the newspaper on the balcony, looked at me with a raised eyebrow. We weren't expecting visitors. When I opened the door, I froze. Jessica was standing on the threshold, pale and visibly thinner than the last time I had seen her in court. She wore simple clothes, without the luxurious adornments she used to sport when she was still married to Michael. "Eleanor," she said, her voice trembling, "I know I have no right to be here, but I had to come." I hesitated. A part of me wanted to slam the door in her face after all the suffering she caused Michael and Lily. But another part, perhaps the lawyer in me, who always sought the truth above all, wanted to hear what she had to say. "Come in," I said finally, making space. She took 2 steps inside and stopped, unsure. Her eyes scanned the room, lingering on the family photos, on Lily's scattered toys, on Michael's crutches, leaning in a corner, rarely used now. Michael appeared in the balcony doorway, leaning on his cane, his face transformed when he saw Jessica, not with anger or resentment as I would expect, but with a surprising serenity. "Jessica," he said, without emotion, "what are you doing here?" She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "I came to apologize. To both of you, I know I probably don't deserve it, but I had to try." I pointed to the sofa. "Sit down." She obeyed, her hands trembling slightly as they rested on the worn purse she carried. Michael sat in the armchair opposite, and I positioned myself beside him, protective as always. "I finished my community service last week," Jessica began, looking at her own hands. "It was 6 months working with disabled children like Michael was after the accident." She looked up, her eyes watery. "At first I hated it. I thought it was unfair to have to be there because of you. But then, something changed. I saw those children, some in much worse situations than yours, Michael, and yet they were happy, determined, full of life. I saw their parents, how they fought daily, how they dedicated themselves." Her voice broke, and I realized how horrible I was, how selfish and cruel I was when you needed me most. Michael remained silent, his face an impenetrable mask. Jessica continued, "When I met Vincent, I was vulnerable, resentful of life, of the accident, of everything. He showed me a world of luxury, of ease. He said I deserved more, that I didn't need to be tied to a broken man." She paused, wiping a tear. "Those were his words, not mine. But I believed him. I let him turn me into a person I no longer recognize." "Why are you telling us this now?" I asked directly, keeping my voice neutral. Jessica opened her purse and took out an envelope. "Because I want you to know the truth, the whole truth. I found this among Vincent's things in the apartment where we were living." She extended the envelope to Michael, who took it cautiously. Inside were photos. Michael before the accident, Lily at school, me leaving the market. We were clearly being watched, followed. There was also a detailed list with our schedules, routines, and frequented places. "My God," I murmured, feeling a shiver run down my spine. He was watching us for a long time. "Since before the accident," Jessica confirmed, her voice choked. He planned everything, Eleanor. Michael's accident wasn't an accident." Michael paled, dropping the photos to the floor. "What?" Jessica covered her face with her hands, sobbing openly now. "Vincent knew the foreman of the construction site. He paid for the scaffolding to be sabotaged. He wanted Michael incapacitated, vulnerable, so I could be easily manipulated into leaving him and eventually fighting for the house. A heavy silence fell over the room. The revelation was so monstrous, so calculated in its cruelty that for a moment none of us could react. "Why?" Michael finally asked, his voice little more than a whisper. Why was our house so important to him? Jessica dried her tears. It wasn't the house itself, it was the location. Vincent's construction company was buying all the properties on the block for a major project. Your house was the only one missing. He tried to buy it legitimately before, but you never wanted to sell. So he decided to destroy us, I concluded, feeling a cold rage grow inside me. Hurt Michael, manipulate you, all to get a piece of land. Jessica nodded, ashamed. When I found out, it was like waking up from a nightmare. I realized I had been used, that I had betrayed the people I once loved for nothing. Michael got up, leaning on his cane, and walked to the window. His profile against the sunlight seemed carved from stone. Why didn't you take this to the FBI immediately? I was scared, Jessica admitted. Scared of what Vincent could do to me, to you, to Lily, even from prison. He has connections everywhere. She paused. But after the community service, after seeing what I did, I couldn't live with this secret anymore. You needed to know the truth. I looked at the photos scattered on the floor. Each image was proof of Vincent's sick obsession, of his determination to destroy us, but they were also proof that he had failed. We were there, still together, still standing. What do you want from us, Jessica? I asked directly. Forgiveness? Reconciliation? She shook her head. I'm not here asking for anything. I just thought you deserved to know the truth. She hesitated, then added in a low voice, and I wanted Lily to know that, despite everything, I love her, that I never stopped loving her, even when I did everything wrong. Michael finally turned from the window. His face was serene, though his eyes reflected the pain of the newly discovered betrayal. Lily is at a friend's house today, but we can talk about a new arrangement for your visits unsupervised, maybe. Jessica looked at him in surprise. After everything I did? After what I just told you? You were manipulated, Michael replied calmly, as we all were in one way or another. The difference is that you had the courage to admit your mistakes and seek redemption. He looked at me. My mother taught me that it's never too late to start over, to be who we really are. I recognize my own words, said to him months ago, the circular wisdom of life passing from mother to son and back again. Jessica left an hour later with a promise to formally take her discoveries to the FBI. Michael and I stayed on the balcony, processing everything we had learned. How do you feel? I asked, watching his profile against the afternoon sun. Strange, he replied honestly. Knowing my accident was planned, that someone deliberately wanted to hurt me that way, is hard to process. I put my hand on his. I'm so sorry, Michael. He shook his head. Don't be. As I told Jessica, we were all manipulated. But look at us now. He smiled, a genuine smile that lit up his eyes. I'm walking again. I have Lily with me. You got your identity back, your passion. In a way, Vincent made us stronger. I reflected on his words. It was true. The trials of the past months had forged a new version of ourselves, stronger, more authentic. The truth, as painful as it was, had set us free. That night, while Lily slept after an exhausting day playing at her friend's house, I took my laptop and started writing. The words flowed easily, decades of untold stories finally finding expression. What are you writing? Michael asked, stopping behind me. My memoirs, I replied. The story of the Eagle of Justice, from the Marlowe case to now. He smiled. Are you going to tell everything, even the hard parts? Especially the hard parts, I confirmed. The whole truth, finally. 2 weeks later, we received another unexpected visit. Detective Renata came personally to inform us that, based on the evidence provided by Jessica, Vincent Thorne would face new charges: attempted murder against Michael and conspiracy. He won't see the light of day again, she guaranteed. The empire he built is crumbling completely. As she prepared to leave, she handed me an official envelope. The U.S. Attorney's Office would like to formalize your position on the task force, Mrs. Vance. No longer as a consultant, but as a special prosecutor for corruption cases. Your experience and knowledge are invaluable to us. I looked at the envelope, surprised and emotional. It was more than I could have ever expected at 60. An opportunity not only to resume my career, but to elevate it to a level that, even in my most ambitious days of youth, I had never imagined. It's an honor, I replied, accepting the envelope. I'll do my best. When Detective Renata left, Michael hugged me tightly. I'm so proud of you, Mom. And I of you, son, of everything you've overcome, of how you faced every challenge. That night, sitting on the balcony under a starry sky, I reflected on the incredible journey we had traveled from despair to hope, from defeat to victory. I thought of the young lawyer I once was, so determined to change the world, of the mother who gave up everything to protect her son, and now of the woman who was finally finding the balance between those two parts of herself. You know what's funny? I said to Michael, contemplating the stars. For years, I thought I had lost the eagle of justice forever, that part of me had died when I chose to be just your mother. And didn't it? No, it just went to sleep, waiting for the right moment to wake up. And when that judge saw me walk into the courtroom, when his eyes widened in recognition, it was as if time had turned back, as if I had never really left. Michael smiled. I think, deep down, I always knew there was more to you than just Mrs. Eleanor. The way you faced problems, how you never accepted injustices, how you always knew exactly what to say in difficult situations. Maybe we don't need to choose who we are, I reflected. Maybe we can be many people at once: mother, lawyer, friend, warrior. Heroine? Michael completed with a fond smile. Don't forget heroine. I laughed, emotional. Did Lily rub off on you with that idea? Actually, it was the other way around. I always knew you were a heroine. Long before she did, I hugged my son tightly, feeling immense gratitude for the life we had now. Our house remained intact, our family stronger than ever. The scars, both the visible ones on Michael's legs and the invisible ones in our souls, had not disappeared, but they no longer hurt as they once did. They had transformed into marks of honor, witnesses to our resilience. And I, Eleanor Vance, the Eagle of Justice, was finally flying again, free and fearless, exactly as it was meant to be. Now, if you enjoyed this story, click subscribe and tell me in the comments what part left you speechless. Oh, and don't forget to become a member to get access to exclusive videos I don't upload here. I'll be waiting for you there.